It all began with a teacup, small, simple, ceramic, the kind offered to guests in meetings, a symbol of respect, always given in silence. But this one almost carried death. President Ibrahim Traoré was in a private meeting at a military base outside Ouagadougou. It was nothing big, just a quiet gathering of senior officers and advisors to discuss logistics for an upcoming operation in the east. Calm, casual, and nothing unusual. They sat in a circle under a mango tree. Cups of warm, spiced tea were passed around by a soldier in plain uniform. Traoré took his cup, as always, with a smile, nodding in thanks. But then he paused. He didn't sip. Not yet. His eyes flicked toward the server, a new face, young, nervous. The soldier held the cup in both hands gently, as if it were glass. Across the circle, Colonel Yaya Konate, an old officer known for his sharp mind and cold eyes, took his first sip eagerly, almost too eagerly. He looked at the president and said, "Please drink, sir. The tea is fresh." But Traoré didn't move. He smiled, then slowly placed the cup down on the small wooden table beside him. The air around them shifted ever so slightly. Not enough for a normal person to notice, but Captain Zongo, always observant, caught the signal. Traoré had trained with wolves, he knew how betrayal smelled. 2 hours earlier, inside the palace, Traoré had received an anonymous tip. A small note had been left on his desk while he was in a meeting: "Watch your tea today. They will test your trust." No name, no clue, just that one warning. He didn't ignore it. Instead, he played along, sticking to the schedule. He traveled to the base, sat among men he had known for years, and waited for someone to show their hand. Now, as the untouched cup sat between them, something was very, very wrong. Traoré looked straight at Colonel Konate and said, "You know, I always find it interesting how many things can hide inside something as small as a cup." Konate gave a tight smile. "That's the beauty of tea, sir." "Or the danger," Traoré replied. Then, he stood up slowly. The tone of the entire meeting changed. President Ibrahim Traoré stood tall, hands behind his back, eyes steady on Colonel Konate. Everyone else at the meeting froze. The air turned thick. The birds nearby had gone silent as if they, too, were waiting for what came next. Traoré didn't raise his voice, he didn't pull rank. He just asked a question, quiet, but sharp, like a blade. "Colonel, do you trust the people who poured this tea?" Colonel Konate blinked, his lips tightening. "Of course, Mr. President." Traoré nodded, then turned to one of the aides and pointed to the untouched cup. "Then please, drink mine." The aide reached for the cup, confused. Konate's eyes widened. "No, wait," he said quickly. "We don't want to mix cups. There could be hygiene issues." Traoré raised his hand. "Hygiene, Colonel. Or poison." The circle of officers went silent. You could hear the wind brushing against the trees. Konate tried to recover. "Mr. President, I assure you, no one here would," but Traoré was already walking away from the table. He pulled out a small walkie-talkie and spoke 2 words, "Bring him." Within seconds, 2 soldiers came forward, escorting the young tea server, the nervous soldier in plain uniform. His hands were tied behind his back, and he looked terrified. His mouth was shaking. One of the president's bodyguards placed a small pouch on the table. Inside it was a tiny plastic vial found hidden in the server's sock. The label on it read VXT42 in tiny writing, a slow-acting neurotoxin, enough to kill a man within minutes. Colorless, tasteless, odorless. And now, it was sitting inside a teacup meant for the lion of Burkina Faso. Traoré turned to the circle of officers. "I've led soldiers into real battles," he said calmly. "And I've buried brothers in war. But this betrayal from inside our own house is worse than any enemy." Then, he looked at Konate again. "You invited me here. You arranged the tea, and you told me to drink first. Konate stood up slowly, his face pale. This is madness. But Captain Zongo was already moving. Within seconds, Konate was surrounded. Traore stepped closer, face to face with him. Did you think I wouldn't feel it, Colonel? You think I made it this far by drinking every cup handed to me? Konate said nothing. Traore leaned in. Men like you don't want power to serve, you want it to sell. Then, he gave the order. Take him in. No public arrest. We're not giving them a show, we're giving them silence. As Konate was led away, the rest of the officers sat in disbelief. The poison had failed, but the message was clear, the lion had been tested, and he did not blink. Back at the palace, the traitor was locked in a cold underground room, the kind where the walls heard every word but never spoke. Colonel Konate refused to talk. He denied everything, claimed he had nothing to do with the young tea server, and said he didn't know about any poison, that he was being framed. But President Ibrahim Traoré wasn't interested in shouting matches. He believed in evidence, quiet, sharp, and solid. Captain Zongo walked into the interrogation room with a small black notebook. It had been found hidden in the soldier's bag, the tea server who nearly served death in a cup. Zongo flipped it open, showing it to Konate. This is your handwriting, he said. Inside the pages were coded names, meeting dates, and strange payment lists, including a large transaction just days before the attempted poisoning. But one name appeared more than any other, El Shakal, the Jackal. Traoré was watching from behind the mirror. He turned to his aide and asked, "Have we heard this name before?" The aide nodded slowly. "Yes, sir. It came up once in an intercepted call 3 months ago, linked to foreign intelligence." Traoré's expression hardened. So this goes beyond Konate. This was no lone wolf. There's a bigger hand behind the cup. Later that evening, Traoré called a silent emergency meeting with only his most trusted men, including Zongo, 2 counterintelligence officers, and 1 civilian cyber expert who had worked on decoding files from the previous coup attempt. They gathered in the underground war room. Zongo laid the notebook on the table. This name, Lash Shakal. He's the handler. He gives the orders. The soldier was just a tool. Konate was the delivery system. Traoré nodded. So what we need is the source. The cyber expert worked fast, connecting phone records, digital trails, and satellite pings. Most of the lines had been wiped clean, but one message stood out. It was from a burner phone used only once. The text said, "For the cup tomorrow. He will see nothing." It had been sent from a location less than 2 kilometers from the French consulate in Ouagadougou. Zongo looked up. So he's still here. Traoré folded his arms. If he's hiding in this city, then we are not hunting a ghost. We are hunting a man. And the hunt has just begun. The game had changed. It was no longer just about catching a corrupt colonel. Now, they were chasing the man behind it all, El Shakal, the shadowy figure who gave the orders and vanished without a face. But Ibrahim Traoré wasn't going to wait for another attack. This time, he would strike first. The hunt for El Shakal had begun. With the intel pointing to a burner phone and the close proximity to the French consulate in Ouagadougou, the team knew that the enemy was still within their reach. Ibrahim Traoré stood with unwavering resolve. The shadowy figure responsible for the poisoning attempt on his life wasn't just a threat to him, he represented the deep, lurking currents of betrayal within the nation's military and government, currents that could undermine the entire country. Traoré wasn't going to let that happen. The cyber expert worked quickly, tracing the burner phone's last known signal to a luxury apartment building in Ouagadougou's upscale district. This was a quiet area, known for being home to diplomats, foreign business workers, and international aid contractors. The building was secure, lacking any surveillance cameras in the hallways, too convenient. Whoever this jackal was, he had protection. He knew how to hide. Zongo, ever the strategist, leaned forward in the war room. Whoever this jackal is, he has the means to blend in. He knows how to stay under the radar. Traore nodded. Then we won't search for him like soldiers. We'll smoke him out like a thief. He approved a silent operation, Operation Glass Eye. No uniforms, no sirens, no announcements, just shadows watching shadows. The team was meticulous. They planted agents disguised as cleaners, fruit sellers, delivery boys, everyday people who could move around unnoticed. One soldier even posed as a building repairman and gained access to the building, planting tiny cameras in the hallways and ventilation ducts. Days passed without incident, the surveillance going undetected. Then, on the third day, they saw him. A tall, pale-skinned man with a sharp jaw, dark glasses, and a clean-cut look, always wearing a hat. He didn't match any of the official embassy staff, but he had a key to apartment 3B, the same apartment that matched the signal from the burner phone. The man was careful. He never left at the same time, never used the same car twice. But then he made a mistake. He ordered food. Traore smiled when he heard the news. Good. Let's deliver it ourselves. That night, Zongo dressed as a delivery man, carrying a bag of food in one hand and a tiny listening device in the other. When the door to apartment 3B opened, the man stared hard at him, cold, sharp eyes. He said nothing, just paid in cash, took the food, and closed the door. But it was enough. The device had recorded everything, his voice, his movements, even the way he walked back into the apartment. Back in the war room, the recorded voice was run through software, and a match popped up. Alexander Morel, a retired French intelligence officer linked to activities in West Africa, officially retired, but known in classified circles as Lakel. It was him, the man who had given the order to kill President Ibrahim Traoré. But arresting him wouldn't be easy. Morel had no diplomatic badge, and if they captured him in public, foreign powers could scream kidnapping. If they raided the apartment, he could disappear in seconds. His exit routes were likely covered. Traore thought for a long moment, then spoke with cold determination. Let's give him what he wants. Zongo raised an eyebrow, confused. Sir, we tell him we're holding a private dinner, invite only, important guests. He'll try again. Traore's eyes narrowed. When he comes, we end it. The trap was set. Traore announced a quiet, high-level dinner to be held inside the presidential villa, just a few trusted guests, no press, no public list. Word spread through the usual channels, just loud enough for the right person to hear. Zongo and the team kept eyes on apartment 3B. They didn't see Morel leave, but they did see his phone activate again, a new burner. This one pinged a message across the city, indicating that another assassination attempt was coming. But this time, Traore was not the target. He was the bait. Inside the palace kitchen, the entire catering team had been replaced by counterintelligence officers in chef uniforms. Every utensil, every dish, every cup was checked and marked. Hidden microphones were placed under the dining table, in the flower vases, even inside the salt shakers. No movement would go unnoticed. At 7:30 p.m., the dinner began. Four guests sat at the table, each one carefully chosen, loyal, and silent, aware of the mission. Traore sat at the head, calm, dressed not in full military uniform, but in a modest traditional tunic. He didn't want to look like a target. Zongo was in the surveillance room, eyes on every angle. No movement from apartment 3B, he whispered into the mic, no entry. Breach detected. But then it happened. A waiter appeared with a tray of drinks. Zongo froze. Who is that? That's not one of ours. The cameras zoomed in. The man moved differently. His face was calm, but his right hand trembled slightly. He set the tray down and stepped back. Traore raised his glass but did not drink. He looked the man in the eye and said, "Would you like to share a drink with your president?" The man hesitated. Traore stood up slowly. You've been running for a long time, Alexander. But you made one mistake. The entire room moved in an instant. Chairs scraped, guards burst in. The man tried to grab a pin from inside his sleeve, something small, something sharp, but Zongo was already behind him. In seconds, he was pinned to the floor. No gun. Traore said, walking over. Just poison again. You really thought the same trick would work twice? Morel, or Lakel, looked up, his face tight with rage. You've made enemies you cannot fight, he hissed. Traore crouched beside him. I'm not fighting them, he said softly. I'm outliving them. He stood up, turning away. No press, no parade. Fly him out tonight to the deepest cell we have. This is not a show. This is a message. Across the city, nothing seemed different. The streets were calm, the night still, but something huge had happened. A second attempt on the president's life had failed. The man behind it all had been caught and silenced. But President Ibrahim Traoré wasn't finished. He knew that this wasn't just about poison or politics. This was a warning, a sign that someone out there was willing to kill for power. And now, they knew that Traoré didn't drink from any cup without checking what was inside. The silence after the storm was almost louder than the storm itself. No announcements were made. No photos were leaked. The man called Lakel, the ghost behind the poison, had vanished into a hole so deep that the world would never find him again. But President Ibrahim Traoré knew the danger hadn't passed. He sat alone in his office the next morning, holding the same ceramic cup from the first attempt. It was washed clean now, empty, but still heavy with meaning. He thought about the young soldier who had carried the poison without understanding it. He thought about Colonel Konate, once a man of honor, now waiting for justice in chains. And he thought about the people, millions who trusted him, not knowing how many times he had walked the edge of death. Then, a knock on the door. Sir, Captain Zongo said, entering the room. The military academy is ready for your address. Traoré nodded. That afternoon, President Ibrahim Traoré walked into the courtyard of Burkina Faso's National Military Academy. Hundreds of young cadets stood in formation, their eyes wide with curiosity. They had heard the whispers, something dangerous had happened, something big, but they didn't know the full truth. Traoré stood on the stage, microphone in front of him, no paper in hand. He didn't need notes. Some of you may not understand the weight of the uniform you wear, he began. You think it gives you power, but it gives you responsibility. He raised the cup, the same one that almost ended his life. This cup almost ended my life. Not because of the tea inside, but because of the trust one placed in the wrong hands. He paused, looking across the sea of young faces, some wide-eyed, others clenching their fists. You will one day guard this nation. But guarding it is not just about guns. It is about honor. About knowing when to speak and when to say no, even when money is offered, even when pressure comes from abroad. He looked at Zongo and raised the cup toward him. This is no longer a symbol of death. This is now a symbol of survival. He placed the cup on a stone pedestal beside the academy flag. Let it remind you, he said, that even the smallest item can carry betrayal or courage. Choose what you carry. The cadets saluted, some wiping away tears. That evening, Traoré sat quietly on the palace rooftop, watching the sunset bleed across the sky. He knew this wouldn't be the last attempt. There would be more jackals, more poison. But each time, they would find the lion waiting. Not because he wanted war, but because he was ready to die standing, rather than live kneeling. And so, the cup remained, not in a museum, not in his home, but in the hands of the next generation. A symbol of vigilance, survival, and of one man's refusal to be broken.